David's family was one of the wealthiest in all of Miami. He was a successful widower with one daughter, Emily. After losing his wife, he wanted his daughter to have a new mother and set up a competition for 5 of the most well-known women in high society to compete to be his new wife. "This woman shouldn't even be in the same room as us," a candidate named Charlotte Harrington whispered to the other 4 candidates. They were sitting around a table in David's lavish estate and had just watched the housekeeper Brenda Johnson, 28, clean up the crystal shards on the marble floor after Charlotte had accidentally knocked over a glass during lunch. The 5 socialites were all vying for David's attention and a chance to become the new wife and mother to his 7-year-old daughter, Emily. Brenda had only been working at the estate for a few months, but had already completely changed the life of Emily, who had lost her mother in a car accident the previous year. What the candidates didn't know was that every cruel word, every look of contempt, and every attempt at humiliation was being carefully watched by David, who kept secrets far deeper than they could imagine. "Daddy, why are those women being mean to Brenda?" Emily asked that morning, hiding behind David's office door. His daughter's innocent question echoed in the businessman's mind as he watched through the security cameras as Brenda was humiliated by the 5 candidates who had arrived 2 weeks earlier to participate in his marriage competition. The idea had come from his therapist. Allow Emily to live with different women for a month and choose who she would like to be her new mother. David had carefully selected 5 women from high society: a lawyer, a doctor, a businesswoman, a socialite, and an architect. All white, all rich, and all seemingly perfect on paper. But from day 1, something disturbing began to happen. The 5 women, led by the cruel Charlotte, an heiress to a real estate fortune, had declared a silent war on Brenda. Not because she was a threat, after all she was just the housekeeper, but because Emily clearly preferred spending time with her than with any of the candidates. "That girl needs to learn about social hierarchy early on," declared a candidate named Victoria Montgomery, the lawyer, during a dinner party they thought they were attending alone. "It's important that she understands who the appropriate people are for her social class." What they didn't know was that David had installed microphones throughout the house after noticing strange changes in Emily's behavior. The girl, who was finally starting to smile again, had returned to having nightmares and anxiety attacks. Brenda, who had a degree in education but was working as a cleaner to support her sick mother, never imagined that her natural kindness toward Emily would trigger such cruelty. Every morning, while preparing breakfast, she heard poisonous comments about people who don't know their place and inappropriate influences for children from good families. But there was something none of the 5 candidates noticed. In Brenda's eyes shone a quiet determination, forged by years of facing prejudices far worse than these. And when she bowed her head in the face of insults, it was not in submission. It was pure strategy from someone who had learned that the best revenge comes to those who know how to wait for the right moment. The next morning, Charlotte gathered the other 4 candidates in the mansion's private library, far from the eyes and ears they imagined were watching them. The plan being hatched was as cruel as it was meticulously calculated. "We need to be strategic about the situation," Charlotte said, adjusting her diamond earrings as she watched Brenda through the window, playing hopscotch with Emily in the garden. "That woman is influencing the child in a way that is inappropriate for our social class." Victoria Montgomery, the corporate lawyer, opened her Italian leather address book. "I've checked the legal procedures. David can fire any employee for cultural incompatibility without any labor issues." "Cultural incompatibility is a fancy euphemism," laughed Christina Hawthorne, the dermatologist who exclusively served Miami's elite. "The problem is more obvious than that." Rebecca Sterling, the architect who had designed mansions for 3 governors, shook her head in disdain. Emily needs to learn early on about appropriate associations. This proximity to the help is creating unrealistic expectations about social relationships. Amanda Chase, an heiress to a chain of luxury hotels, was more direct. Let's stop beating around the bush. The problem is that a black cleaning lady is taking up emotional space that should be ours. Emily should be clinging to one of us, not her. What none of them knew was that Brenda had grown up hearing conversations just like this one. The daughter of a housekeeper who had worked for wealthy families for 30 years, she knew every code, every euphemism, and every strategy that privileged people used to justify their cruelty. At 14, Brenda had witnessed her mother being fired after 20 years of impeccable service, simply because her employer's son had become too close to her. The veiled accusation of not knowing her place had echoed through the halls of that Charleston mansion. And now, 14 years later, the same poisonous whispers were resurfacing in Miami. But there was something these women couldn't see behind Brenda's apparent humility. Her education at a local university had not just been a degree. It had been a silent declaration of war against the system that had tried to break her family. During the 3 years she had worked in public schools before being forced to take domestic jobs to pay for her mother's cancer treatment, Brenda had learned to read people with surgical precision. She knew exactly when she was being underestimated, and, more importantly, she knew how to use that underestimation to her advantage. "Emily, sweetheart," Charlotte said that afternoon, intercepting the girl as she ran to find Brenda in the kitchen. "How about we play something more sophisticated? I brought a chess set back from France, especially for you." "I don't know how to play chess," Emily replied, trying to continue on her way. "That's exactly why you need to learn," insisted Victoria, gently blocking the hallway. "Intellectual games are important for the development of privileged minds." "Brenda taught me how to play checkers yesterday," said Emily, unaware of the tension her words created. "She said games help you think better, no matter what they are." Christina exchanged a meaningful glance with the others. "Honey, there's a difference between different types of games. Some are more appropriate for certain people." It was at that moment that Brenda appeared at the kitchen door, carrying a tray of still warm cookies. She had heard every word, but her expression remained serene, almost maternal. "Sorry to interrupt," she said with a politeness that bordered on perfection. "Emily, your chocolate chip cookies are ready." The girl's eyes lit up instantly. "Brenda, did you make the butterfly-shaped cookies like you promised?" "I did, sweetie, and I saved some extra for after dinner." Charlotte watched the interaction with growing irritation. The naturalness of the affection between them was undeniable, and it made her mission even more urgent. "Brenda," Charlotte said, trying out the maid's name for the first time, but pronouncing it as if it were an unpleasant foreign word. "Don't you think you're taking on too much responsibility with Emily? We're here to take care of those developmental needs." Brenda smiled politely, but something flashed in her dark eyes. "Of course, Miss Charlotte. I was just following Mr. David's instructions about keeping Emily fed and happy." "Naturally," Amanda said, joining the conversation, "but feeding is different from forming emotional bonds. It would be best to maintain an appropriate professional distance." "I understand perfectly," Brenda replied, her voice maintaining the same dangerous sweetness. "I've always been taught that caring for children means giving them exactly what they need when they need it." The answer was too polite, too diplomatic, and it made the 5 women uncomfortable. There was something about Brenda's calmness that suggested a much sharper intelligence than they had assumed. That night, David watched discreetly through the cameras as the candidates organized their next move. They had decided to document every one of Brenda's transgressions, creating a dossier of inappropriate behavior to present to him. What David was discovering was very different from what they thought they were documenting. Each video showed Brenda being professional, caring, and genuinely attentive to Emily's needs. In contrast, it showed 5 adult women visibly uncomfortable with the natural affection between a child and her caregiver. But there was something more disturbing emerging from the recordings. David began to notice a pattern in the candidates' actions. Small acts of sabotage, calculated comments designed to undermine Emily's trust in Brenda, and subtle attempts to create situations where she would appear incompetent. "Daddy," Emily said that night during dinner, "why don't the ladies like Brenda?" The question hit the table like a silent bomb. The 5 candidates froze with their forks in midair. "What kind of question is that, sweetie?" Charlotte said, forcing a motherly smile. "We like all the staff." "That's not true," Emily replied, with the brutal honesty of children. "I heard you say she didn't know her place." David felt the blood drain from his veins. "Emily, where did you hear that?" "In the library this morning they were talking about making Brenda go away." The silence that followed was deafening. 5 intelligent, articulate women suddenly found themselves speechless, for a 7-year-old child had exposed their conspiracy with the precision of a seasoned prosecutor. "Emily, you must have misunderstood," Victoria said quickly. "Adult conversations sometimes sound different to children's ears." But David was watching the expressions around the table, and every face confirmed that Emily had understood perfectly. Worse, he was beginning to realize that his daughter wasn't the only one who had been underestimated in this house. Each new humiliation and every attempt to diminish Brenda only strengthened something inside her that her oppressors couldn't see. A silent strength, fueled by the very injustice they tried to impose, built on years of resistance that had begun long before she set foot in that mansion, and which now grew with the certainty of someone who knows that the revenge is to let your enemies destroy themselves with their own arrogance. On Wednesday morning, Brenda woke up 2 hours earlier than usual and called her older sister, Diane, in another city. The conversation took place in whispers in the small room she occupied in the mansion's annex. "Diane, I need you to do something for me," Brenda said, looking out the window at the still dark lights of the main house. "Remember those contacts you made when you worked at the Department of Education?" Diane Williams Johnson, a graduate of a local university with a degree in investigative journalism and currently a producer at a major news network, immediately sensed the tension in her sister's voice. "Brenda, what's going on? You never call me at this time of day." "I'm being attacked by 5 wealthy women who want to get me out of here, and I need ammunition to defend myself." For the next 20 minutes, Brenda meticulously detailed every humiliation, every racist comment disguised as social concern, and every attempt at sabotage. Diane listened silently, her journalistic experience immediately recognizing the patterns of systemic discrimination she had investigated for years. "Brenda, are you sure you want to go to war? These women have resources and connections." "Diane, our mother worked 30 years being humiliated by people like this. I'm not going to repeat her history. Not when I have Emily to protect." The mention of Emily made Diane understand the gravity of the situation. She knew her sister had developed a genuine maternal bond with a child, something that had blossomed naturally after years of working with traumatized children in public schools. "All right, give me their full names and 48 hours. I'll find out everything you need to know." Meanwhile, David stepped up his own silent investigation. He had discreetly hired a private investigator, Marcus Thompson, who specialized in background checks on the social elite. What he was discovering about his 5 candidates was disturbing. Charlotte Harrington had been expelled from 2 charitable organizations for financial irregularities that had been hushed up by her family's fortune. Victoria Montgomery had a history of labor lawsuits filed by employees alleging harassment and racial discrimination. Christina Hawthorne had lost her medical license in 2 states before settling in Florida. Rebecca Sterling had been investigated by the Internal Revenue Service for tax evasion, and Amanda Chase was being sued by 3 former employees of her hotel chain for creating a hostile work environment based on racial discrimination. "Mr. David," Marcus said during an encrypted phone call, "these women aren't just prejudiced. They're systemic predators who use their social position to destroy vulnerable people." Meanwhile, at the mansion, the 5 candidates were escalating their attacks on Brenda. Charlotte had devised a meticulous plan to create situations where Brenda would appear incompetent or inadequate. "We need to document every mistake, every moment she crosses professional boundaries," Charlotte instructed during a morning meeting in Victoria's bedroom. "David is a rational man. With enough evidence, he'll be forced to fire her." Victoria opened her laptop and showed a prepared document. "I've created a detailed behavioral report. Allegations of violation of family privacy, inappropriate influence over Emily, attempts to emotionally manipulate her boss. All lies, but very well substantiated," added Christina, admiring the legal sophistication of the document. "With my medical background, I can add concerns about psychological impact on the child." Rebecca and Amanda exchanged satisfied smiles. They were convinced they had engineered Brenda's perfect destruction. Professional, systematic, and impossible to contest by a mere cleaning lady with no resources or formal education. What they didn't know was that Brenda had anticipated this strategy exactly. During her years working in public schools, she had faced principals and coordinators who used identical tactics to remove black teachers who didn't fit in with the institutional culture. That afternoon, while discreetly cleaning David's office, Brenda accidentally found the candidate report open on the printer. She quickly read each accusation, each malicious distortion of her interactions with Emily, and each attempt to turn her genuine affection into something inappropriate or suspicious. Instead of panic or despair, Brenda felt a cold calm spread through her body. It was the same serenity she had developed at 14 when she witnessed her mother being fired for excessive emotional closeness with the children she cared for. That night, after Emily fell asleep, Brenda made another crucial phone call. This time to her former supervisor at her university, Professor Alice Morrison, one of the leading authorities on child development and separation trauma. "Professor Morrison, I need your professional help documenting the emotional well-being of a child in a very delicate situation." Dr. Morrison, who had advised Brenda on her dissertation on reparative bonds in orphan children, immediately understood the gravity of the request. "Brenda, you want me to conduct an independent psychological evaluation?" "Exactly. And I need it done in a way that will be indisputable in any court or legal situation." During the 40-minute conversation that followed, Brenda outlined not only a defense plan, but an offensive strategy that would use the very academic and professional expertise that her attackers assumed she lacked. The next day, David watched through the cameras as the candidates carried out their most cruel sabotage yet. They had hidden Emily's favorite teddy bear, a gift from her late mother, and then discovered the toy in Brenda's closet. "Emily, honey, we found your teddy bear," Charlotte announced dramatically, pulling the toy out of the closet as Emily cried desperately. It was in the employee's room. The girl looked at Brenda with confusion and hurt. "Brenda, why did you take my teddy bear?" "I didn't take it, sweetie," Brenda replied calmly, but David could see the pain in her eyes through the camera. "Someone must have put him there by mistake." "Mistake?" said Victoria, feigning disbelief. "Emily, did you leave your teddy bear in the employee's room?" "No," whispered Emily, tears streaming down her face. "I always leave him on my bed." Christina approached and knelt down to the child's height. "Honey, sometimes people, different people, take things that aren't theirs. It's not necessarily out of malice, but out of envy or a desire to have nice things." It was at that moment that David saw something extraordinary happen. Instead of desperately defending herself or protesting her innocence, Brenda simply hugged Emily and whispered, "My little one, You know in your heart that I would never take anything of yours. And people who truly love you would never try to confuse that heart. The mature wisdom and unshakable dignity of that response contrasted brutally with the calculated cruelty of the 5 women. David realized he was witnessing not just racial discrimination, but a systematic attempt to psychologically destroy both his employee and his own daughter. That night, while the candidates secretly celebrated what they considered their definitive victory, Brenda received a call from Diane that would completely change the game. "Sister, you won't believe what I found out about your new friends. And best of all, it's all publicly documented. They're much more vulnerable than they realize." Across the mansion, David made a decision that would seal the fate of the 5 women. He had seen enough, gathered enough evidence, and come to a conclusion that left him both furious and determined. It was time to stop watching passively and start taking action. But first, he needed to have a very serious conversation with the woman he had completely underestimated, and who was about to discover that she had allies and resources far more powerful than any of her attackers could have imagined. Each new cruelty had not only strengthened Brenda's resolve, but had revealed a character that turned each attack into fuel for a response that would be as intelligent as it was devastating, proving that sometimes the person who seems most vulnerable is exactly the one who possesses the most lethal weapons in a war his enemies didn't even know they had lost. The following Friday, David called a special meeting. He had discreetly invited Dr. Alice Morrison, Diane Williams Johnson from the news network, and investigator Marcus Thompson. The 5 candidates showed up thinking they would finally receive the decision on who would be chosen. "Ladies, before I announce my decision, I would like to share some interesting findings," David said, turning on the screen in the room. Charlotte smiled confidently. "Sure, David. We're eager to hear them." The first image that appeared was a news article. "Real estate heiress diverts charity funds." Charlotte's photo was splashed across the headline. "That's a lie," Charlotte shouted, her face turning red. "Is it?" asked Diane, standing up. "I'm Diane Williams Johnson from a major news network. I confirm every word of this report." David clicked to the next slide. Victoria Montgomery appeared being sued for racial discrimination against 3 Black employees. "David, this is out of context," Victoria tried nervously. "Context?" interrupted Marcus Thompson. "I'm a private investigator. All of these documents are public and verified." The next images devastated Christina, Rebecca, and Amanda one by one. Lawsuits for medical malpractice, tax evasion, and a hostile work environment. "You are all systemic predators," David said coldly, "and I have documented every attack you have made against Brenda." He played the recordings. The voices of the 5 women echoed through the room. Racist comments, plans for sabotage, and the setup with Emily's teddy bear. "This is invasion of privacy," Charlotte yelled. "In my own home?" David laughed bitterly. "Where you plotted to destroy an innocent person." Dr. Morrison approached. "As a child development expert, I evaluated Emily this week. The child demonstrates healthy restorative bonds with Brenda, which are essential to her post-traumatic development." Emily, who had been called into the room, ran straight to Brenda. "Brenda, you're not leaving, are you?" "No, sweetheart," Brenda said calmly, hugging the girl. David looked directly at the 5 women. Brenda Johnson has a degree in education from a local university, 3 specializations in child development, and impeccable references. You assumed she was just a cleaning lady because she's Black. Charlotte tried one last card. "David, you're making a terrible mistake. Think of the social standing, the future of Emily." "I am thinking," David interrupted. "Brenda, will you marry me?" The silence was deafening. Brenda looked at Emily, then at David. "I will," Emily screamed with joy. "Now Brenda will be my real mom." The 5 candidates were in total shock. Charlotte was as pale as a sheet. "Impossible," Christina whispered. "You're going to marry the maid?" "I'm marrying the most honest woman I know," David replied. "The woman who cared for my daughter with true love while you plotted to destroy her out of pure prejudice. Diane was filming everything. This story will be on the air Monday. Racist socialites exposed, the fall of 5 elite predators. Their reputations, careers, and social circles are destroyed," Marcus added, "all documented and irrefutable." Charlotte tried to leave, but David stopped her. "Oh, one last thing. I'm suing all of you for conspiracy, slander, and attempted destruction of character. My lawyers are already on it." The 5 left the mansion humiliated, photographed by the journalists Diane had called. Their cell phones were already ringing with angry calls from clients, friends, and family who had seen the first news stories leaking on social media. Brenda remained standing, dignified and serene, holding Emily in her arms. "Thank you for believing in me," she said to David. "Thank you for showing me what really matters," he replied, kissing her gently. While the former contestants faced the total collapse of their privileged lives, a new family was born, built on true love, mutual respect, and the ultimate victory of dignity over prejudice, proving that sometimes the greatest revenge is simply to live well, while those who tried to destroy you watch their own masks fall publicly, revealing to the whole world who they really always were behind all that false sophistication. 2 years later, Diane's article had become a case study on racial discrimination in journalism schools across the country. The 5 women faced devastating and permanent consequences. Charlotte Harrington lost her family inheritance when the board discovered her charitable embezzlement. Today, she works as a sales clerk in a department store, constantly recognized by customers who saw the story. Victoria Montgomery was fired from her law firm and had her license suspended. Rebecca Sterling went bankrupt after losing all her architectural clients. Christina Hawthorne moved to another state after her clinic closed. Amanda Chase sold her hotels to pay workers' compensation claims. Meanwhile, Brenda prospered in an extraordinary way. David had insisted that she finish her master's degree in special education, and now she ran a foundation that offered scholarships to underprivileged children to study music and the arts. "Mom, Brenda, look what I learned on the piano today," Emily shouted, running home after class. At 9, she had mastered 3 instruments and spoke fluent Portuguese after lessons with Brenda's grandmother, who had moved into the mansion. The family had grown. 6-month-old David Jr. slept peacefully in Brenda's arms as she organized documents for the foundation named after Emily. "Honey, another thank you letter," David said, handing her the envelope. "This time it's from a mother in Miami whose son got a full scholarship to study violin." Brenda smiled, remembering the conversation she had had with Emily the week before. The girl had asked why the mean girls had tried to send her away. "Sweetie, some people are born with everything and think that makes them better than others. But you know what the secret is?" Brenda had replied. "People like that always destroy themselves because kindness and cruelty cannot live in the same heart." During an interview on the country's most watched morning show, David was asked about his controversial decision to marry Brenda. "Controversial?" he laughed. "I married a woman who is educated, intelligent, saved my daughter from depression, and taught me the true meaning of family. If that's controversial, then the problem isn't with me." The host pressed on. "But what about the social differences?" "What differences?" David replied, looking directly at the camera. "My wife has a master's degree, runs a foundation that has benefited 1,000 children, speaks 3 languages, and raises my children with more love and wisdom than any socialite could ever dream of having." Brenda watched from home, Emily on her lap, smiling proudly at the man who had chosen to love her exactly as she was. At Emily's school, other children constantly asked about her famous mother. "She's the bravest woman in the world," Emily would reply proudly. "And she makes the best chocolate cake, too." Brenda's true revenge had not been to destroy her attackers. It had been to live so well that her happiness became living proof that people like Charlotte were fundamentally wrong about human worth. That Sunday morning, as she watched David playing with her children in the garden where she had once been humiliated, Brenda reflected on how life had changed. It wasn't just that she had won. It was that she had turned her victory into something greater than herself. "Love," David called from the garden. "Come here. Emily wants to show you the song she wrote for you." Oin. Brenda walked toward the family she had built, knowing that sometimes the greatest revenge against prejudice is not to strike back with anger, but to respond with so much love and success that you completely rewrite the rules of the game.